Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you all for sticking with us the whole day. We really appreciate it. We are going to kick off our sixth and last panel of the day. So this is the final event of AI and Society House. And I am so pleased to welcome a very illustrious and enthusiastic group of panelists who will introduce themselves, but I'll just start by giving their names and their roles. And yes, we're pleased to welcome Kara Franson, Program Officer at Heising Simons Foundation, Martin Hullen, Director at Bertelsmann Stiftung, and I practiced that a few times. I hope I got it right. I had a German friend tell me how to pronounce. Actually, 2 Germans tell me how to pronounce it. Dorothy Chow, an AI angel investor, and also the Director of Policy and Public Engagement at Google DeepMind. Eric Svensson, the CEO at the Impact Platform by Catapult. And last but certainly not least, Chris Jurgens, Senior Director at Omidyar Network. So would you like to just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, or brief intros? And here's a microphone.
It's Kara Franson. I work on the Tech and Society Fund of the Heising Simons Foundation. We're in San Francisco, more specifically in Silicon Valley. And we've been funding in this area. This is our 3rd year of funding. I kind of came from intersection of policy and philanthropy. And so tech is also a new category for me, but as a generalist and as a grant maker, it's very, very much a high priority for our foundation.
Yeah, Martin Hullen from the Bertelsmann Stiftung. We are Weird Cookie. We are operating foundation. So we have an endowment, but we are also one of the biggest think tanks in Europe, actually, working on digital topics. I have come from the policy side in renewable energy and sustainability. Originally building multi-stakeholder bodies, but also was a tech entrepreneur before. And now we could connect the best of both worlds because there are some echoes and some learnings that we are now reapplying in that sector as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dorothy, and I've spent about 20 years in the tech industry now doing tech policy work, starting with internet policy early on in Washington, D.C., all the way through being in Silicon Valley and the sharing economy, and now spent the past 7.5 years at Google DeepMind. And as Theo was saying, in my spare time, I spend time angel investing specifically in activating undervalued markets by working with overlooked founders.
Awesome. I'm Eric Svensson. I am someone who spent 2/3 of my life building and scaling companies, technologist at heart. 1/3 of my life trying to save 200-year-old companies. Decided let's go the other path. Let's build the future instead. I'm working for Catapult, one of the original kind of impact investors out of the Nordics. We have a foundation, we have an annual kind of event called the Catapult Future Fest, and we have a number of investment vehicles. So we've invested in about 200 sort of technology impact startups, including a number of unicorns, etc. We're sort of now moving into the AI space as well. So that's one of our new focus areas.
Hey everyone, I'm Chris Jurgens. I'm a senior director at Omidyar Network. We are a philanthropy and impact investing firm based out of Silicon Valley that has responsible technology as our core mission. We focus on 3 drivers of shaping our digital future: the culture of tech, policy and the governance of tech, and the business of tech. Under that last pillar, I lead a portfolio focused on responsible tech investing and responsible governance in tech. On the philanthropic side, we're running a portfolio focused on how do we advance responsible technology investing practices across venture capital and other asset classes. And on the investing side, I'm working with our CEO, Mike Kubzansky, on setting up a new responsible tech investing fund focused on AI infrastructure companies with a strong responsibility thesis.
Well, thank you all. So as you can see, we have a very impressive panel. My first question is about setting the stage. So a lot has been happening in recent days and months and recent years. Can you tell us a little bit about the trends that you're observing in this space or some of the challenges that are impacting how you're viewing the work that you're doing? And Kara, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think we sort of switched gears pretty quickly when we understood the outcome of the elections. And one thing is we wanted to stay in the legislative and regulatory space. And so kind kind of set our eyes onto the state level work in the US, and found there's actually quite a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of underdeveloped networks and connections. And so we're looking at different states, Colorado, Connecticut, Maryland, California. Colorado passed the first kind of sweeping AI bill. It was sort of passed with the promise to be revised, which is happening right now. And so we know there's opportunity to move regulation and legislation at the state level. The challenge is technical expertise. So if any of you tracked the California bill, that bill was actually drafted by a fellow who had a background in biology. And so we've just seen a real lack of expertise at local and state level government, although that is quickly changing. So we've been looking at opportunities to fund, kind of channel expertise into government so that those decisions are made with a lot of insight. And then also looking to support civil society groups that are educating legislators. Alex at CDT is one of them, and a conversation we recently had was around mapping and how do we understand kind of the constituents that legislators are listening to, and tap into those groups to have their voices be heard about what their concerns are around AI. So it's a real opportunity to kind of tap into that ground level and bring that information to legislators who are not beholden right now specifically to the federal narrative.
Yeah, so from our perspective, when looking at the trends we're observing currently, I mean, we are coming out of 5 years of regulatory activity on the Commission level in Europe, which of course brought us the AI Act, the DSA, and many other quite powerful tools. But at the same time, there's this rough awakening in Europe, also after the outcome of the elections, that firstly, it's all about implementation of these regulatory frameworks. And secondly, you cannot regulate yourself out of also, the competition challenge right now. And there is this realization that there is also the underbelly, so to speak, of the public interest AI stack. So really the infrastructural perspective again of what would enable also the type of scale of trust and safety tools, responsible behavior, incentivization structures, really, and quite some interesting developments there. But that leads me over to the challenges that I'm seeing in this regard. We're still missing also even a mental model of what we are trying to describe there, even from a European point of view. And it's almost kind of, a paradigm that's positioned right now in between the American paradigm that we are very familiar with, the innovation paradigm, so the state monopolistic one that's coming out of China, with also, the results that we are seeing that are quite competitive. And a challenge, but also an opportunity for them later to see how we actually make this a little bit more tangible, not only for decision makers, but also through a discussion with, a much wider array also of citizens within the continent and outside that would like to have value aligned also public interest AI. And we don't feel the narrative is currently clear to everybody.
So I started doing angel investing for two specific reasons that feed into each other. The first is that as I was working in AI, I was thinking we are promising all these advancements in health, energy, education, housing, transportation, all these fields that are public interest areas that we all care about, but I don't think that's happening fast enough. So that was the first thought I had. And why is that happening? The second thought I had was that I don't think the AI industry as it stands today is reflective of society as a whole. So those things feed into each other, because when it comes to AI and which problems are selected to be addressed with AI first, that has a direct impact based on who's working there and who's making those decisions. And so in my mind, it was really important to get more people into the field who were representative of society making those decisions together. And the best way to do that is to support founders who were historically underserved. I will also tell you that I have enough colleagues who've left Google DeepMind, who've started their own companies, that when the male colleagues leave and have just one sentence on a computer screen, they get millions of dollars. And when senior women who are coming from technical leadership roles, so with the same exact credentials, go out and raise for something that they personally care about, such as mental health, using AI to address mental health in some capacity, they come back to DeepMind because they can't get the funding. And that is a total travesty to me. I think in the UK, the number is 0.3% of AI companies founded in the past decade were founded by women, were funded by VC. 0.3, not 3. So that's a huge problem. And I think a lot about how do you choose the right problems to address. 3 things we think about at Google DeepMind that I think are important because not every problem can be fixed with AI. The first is there a strong high fidelity data set like the protein data bank that we use to build AlphaFold, which is our Nobel winning system? The second is there a huge combinatorial space that you can go through to find that answer of highly complex problems that we need to be able to surf through a huge data set for answers in different combinations? And the third is there a third-party validated benchmark that you can test your optimizations against? Because you can't decide on your own as a lab, this is what good looks like. It has to be validated by an external community, which is what we had in biology, which is a really interesting area. So when I think about problem selection, it's not clear to me that the selfie apps that we're getting with a quick buck in VC are at all close to what kind of transformation we want to see. And that's what I would love to see shift in the next few years.
All right, I have the pleasure of going after these amazing people, so I can sort of harken back to that. There's kind of 3 things that matters a lot to us at Catapult. The first sort of trend is all the challenges coming with the rapid developments in AI. We like to see it more as an opportunity than a challenge, but that requires sort of action and a lot of attention. The last couple of days have been kind of made this super clear. We've been working now with a bunch of foundations, other types of money. There's not pure sort of VC money. And there's a very clear sort of alignment on the challenges, but there's also a kind of a bit of a paralysis in terms of what exactly to do. And we don't really have that much of a window of opportunity to engage. So that becomes our mission very, very clearly. The second trend is around the change of VC. We're someone who's done a lot of early stage investments, most of them in very diverse founders, including founders in emerging markets. And that's something we're building on. We see that the VC landscape is changing. We want to do rapid niche kind of micro funds. That's one of our responses. That means you can raise the fund quickly, you can deploy it quickly, and you can move through quickly in a time of uncertainty. So that's something we're embracing. We're doing that by incorporating AI tooling in our own operations, leveraging whatever is like an efficient way of running funds. And we're also then focusing on deploying domain experts as fund managers rather than, let's say, traditional fund managers. So that's one of our direct responses to that. The third trend we're seeing, which is very actionable to us, is exactly what Dorothy kind of mentioned. Lots of emerging founders, people starting companies, both within sort of, let's say, AI sort of governance, AI transparency, end-to-end monitoring, like these sort of things, where we can turn our mind from being kind of reactive and sitting like, oh, what the hell do we do about this, to kind of intervening, and at least in some of the deployments of these technologies, especially where enterprises and companies are taking these technology into use. It's a lot more realistic, we think, to intervene in that deployment rather than to challenge all the, let's say, foundational models and how they are sort of developing. So these are kind of the three things we're sort of acting on.
Yeah, all these trends resonate. Let me share a few additional ones from where we sit in the responsible AI investing market. First, on the LP side, we've been out in the market a lot talking to LPs as we seek to raise this new responsible AI fund. We've encouragingly seen really strong demand for a fund thesis that marries a focus on core AI infrastructure, LLM compute, a really high bar on sustainability, safety, responsibility as a screen, and a focus on top-tier market returns. On the other hand, talking to LPs, we see it's very early for most in thinking about responsible technology as a responsible investing issues. Most LPs purely think about the alpha side of things, but we think it needs to be a responsible investing issue, much like climate is, or workers' rights. And a survey is coming out this week from our friends at Venture ESG and Project Liberty that says only 19% of LPs think they have the capabilities and expertise to do responsible tech investing, compared to 75% who think they're good at ESG investing in general. So we see a huge gap and opportunity to address that gap to move that other 60% of LPs into adopting TEP as a lens in their ESG and responsible investing. Then looking downstream at the investment opportunity side of things, a few things we're tracking and looking at as we build out our portfolio. One is opportunities in assurance tech, business models for reg tech, bias detection, other trust and safety solutions. Second, looking at responsibility in the context of agentic AI, so trust and safety solutions, particularly in high-risk sectors like healthcare and financial services. And another thing we're really interested in tracking is data compensatory mechanisms and way data content creators and providers can get compensated when their data is used in training models, and what are new ways to scale up that.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing this robust list of challenges and some initial recommendations as well. Now, I'd like to turn us more fully to the conversation of opportunities and solutions. So what are some of the key solutions that you all envision that strategic investing can make to drive positive societal impact? And Kara, again, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, I think another area we're looking at is nonprofits that are starting to integrate technology into their work. So using AI to advance their mission. And that just came from a place of curiosity, our foundation trying to understand, especially because we have different program areas. So we fund in human rights, climate change, planetary sciences, and early childhood education. And so we really wanted to understand, grantees in those portfolios. At what point are they going to be intersecting with this technology? Are they ready to use the technology to advance their missions? Currently, we're with a list of a lot of infrastructure needs to get to a point where civil society is ready to integrate with technology and developers. So we're looking at, how do you build those bridges between technologists, civil society, social scientists, people with the lived experiences, and communicate that text to developers that are trained very, very differently. The other thing is just educating philanthropy in general. As probably many of you know, if you've fundraised with foundations, we move very, very, very slow, and that doesn't really fit the model we're all talking about today. So at our foundation, we have a number of colleagues who've been in the tech space for a long time. They've been funding exclusively in technology, where we sort of represent a sizable foundation. We're a family foundation that funds in program areas, and we're just trying tech for the first time. And so internally, we're talking about how do we educate and communicate what we're doing to our colleagues? How do we bring other grant makers on board? And so I think that's an area that we all are asking from the field, like, help us, educate us. This is not our background, unless it's a foundation with a deep tech experience. And then just back to preparing civil society for more of like a launch ready, let's go integrate tech. Big questions, just like channels to accessing community voice, other infrastructure things like compute time and data sets. And I mean, everything that industry has been working on for a long time, standardizing data. That's something that we are now working on. And so we're just seeing a big opportunity to prepare civil society better to take advantage of these advancements.
Yes, from our side, it's a combination really of strategic de-risking, showcasing, and overall storytelling. Because again, as an operating foundation, I think we're not perceived as risk capital, but on many levels we are, because we actually can do things that others would have to fundraise for, would have to get legitimacy for, and cannot move as fast as we dare. But it's actually contrary to the conservative setup of many foundations and endowments. So it's a little bit of a paradox of trying to do it. We dare doing it as long as, until somebody hits us on the hands, so to speak. And to give a few examples of the de-risking aspect. So we do this quite strategically in the sense of trying to pilot certain solutions that we believe would then actually unlock additional funding coming in after. A very concrete example is something we called Kita Match in German. So it's nursery match. So it was a transparent algorithm to solve the issue of very limited space for nurseries in Germany, to enable especially women to keep staying in the workforce. And there was huge mistrust after a lot of misuse, of course, of these types of algorithmic recommendation systems to adopt something like this, even on a country scale. But we developed a full transparent mechanism, involved hundreds of people developing it, and then basically made it a public good and made it available for others to then implement and utilize, and kind of they benefit from the de-risking kind of aspect. Showcasing is something that we do, again, very consciously, on throwing a spotlight on what we believe are wonderful other examples of responsible AI uses outside of AlphaFold, because we do this all the time. You know, everybody goes to AlphaFold saying like, wow, look at this. But there are thousands, tens of thousands of examples that are still in the seed stage that people are not aware of. But I think that would capture, you know, emotional imagination, which leads me then over again to the storytelling aspect, where I think that's part of what we are also trying to do when we convene other funders or also investors together, to then align us, at least through storytelling and the terminologies that we use, so that we also capture, you know, the hearts and minds of people through the story that we hope responsible AI can also be told through, which is diverse. Yeah.
So I believe that how you invest shows what you believe about the future and whether things should change or if they should stay the same on some level. And one of the things I think needs to change is the fact that today, the way VC works, founders are forced to build for early adopters who can pay, because that's the system that you're in. But if procurement, and I really believe in public-private partnerships, if procurement was easier, especially on the local levels where you're doing public service delivery on a regular basis, it would just be such a transformative shift for founders to have to start building for everyone, not just the early adopters who can pay. And I'd really love to see this change. I have a few examples, which is one company that I invested in called Justice Text, coming out of the US, actually works in partnership with public defenders' offices across multiple states so that they can better comb through police body camera footage in order to provide better defense and also like better justice outcomes. Another is a group called Reflex AI, and they are coming out of the Trevor Project in the US. And if you're not familiar, it is the main LGBTQ suicide prevention hotline. What they've done is not replace suicide hotline calls with AI, but what they realized is that they had a huge backlog of volunteers and not enough people to train them. And the truth is that training is incredibly emotionally intensive for the trainers. And so there's a lot of breaks in between. And turns out you can actually do a lot of simulations with an AI system that is fine-tuned for that specific purpose to train people. And you can give them empathy scores, make different suggestions, and do things. So they've actually now taken a grant from Google.org to build out their entire system for veterans as well and suicide prevention, and are now moving into 911. They're in their Series B. And I just think about these types of companies as the ones that are going to make the biggest difference on the widest range of levels. On top of that, I just think there's a missed opportunity because government contracts don't fluctuate with the market. Actually, government needs to function even more when the economy is not doing well. So there's a huge opportunity there that we just haven't quite figured out, where I do think a lot of these technologies already exist, but somehow aren't making it to public benefit. And I'd love to see that happen. And if you're in the policy space like I am, that's something I'd love to work together on.
Cool. How can we beat that? We're coming from a sort of place of action. So we're someone who puts money, talent, and so on behind talented founders. We already work with a number of kind of deep tech founders and AI sort of native kind of startups. And we're increasing our focus on people engaging in the kind of pure sort of AI, like the challenges of the rollout of AI at the moment. That's one of the things we feel is actionable and where the window of opportunity is relatively short, like to get some action there. So we see all these amazing sort of founders coming up with great ideas. Our whole operation is based around scouting for intentionality, assessing impact. We run our sort of startups through more than 100 hours of impact assessment, impact kind of strategy, impact measurements. We even force them to quantify their impact kind of thing. So this is sort of what we do. We're now applying this sort of further in the AI space. We're doing this in collaboration with Raman Chowdhury as well. So that is sort of our direct response to the challenge, and where we see that there is opportunity. On a personal level, I'm already engaged with a number of AI kind of companies. One that solves solves very fundamental issues with the healthcare in Europe through the use of AI. Some of them come from Google, some of them come from kind of Babylon Health, which is maybe a mixed story in Europe, I guess. But these type of people who have very clear intentions, very clear sort of mission, and some of them, like the healthcare company, has an explicit strategy of exiting to the public as well. So, for example, forking off their code base to a government, these type of things. So these are the kind of things we are scouting and screening for. And concretely, we are looking for, let's say, small kind of ecosystem players who can intervene in the rollout of kind of grander AI and LLMs, etc. So that we can start altering the landscape. So this is within AI security, which is a huge and kind of topic in itself, but also in AI transparency, monitoring, and these sort of things. So basically taking a sort of proactive approach to the appliance of AI, rather than to sit back and be concerned about what's happening. So that's our sort of concrete response to it and the opportunity we see. The last couple of days has inspired us on a more philosophical level as well. We have a foundation who spends a great deal of time on system change and so forth. And actually bridging that with some more audacious kind of European initiatives is also kind of on the table. We'll return to that a bit later. And in the meantime, we're doing kind of small but important steps where we can.
All right, I get the hard job batting cleanup after all the other great perspectives, but a few additional thoughts on how we think responsible tech investing can advance us towards the digital future we want, and instead of being pushing against it. I think first, to really shift in venture, we have to demonstrate the business case that responsible AI, taking the high road, is consistent with value creation, is a competitive advantage and not a barrier to it. And that's one of the primary reasons we're setting up this fund, is to show that these are the companies that are going to win in the long run, that have higher standards on transparency, safety, and responsibility. Second, we think we need to bring more market actors into the right side of the policy and regulatory debates. And so in addition to the fund, we're going to set up a policy vehicle in the US, where we think it's particularly important to have voices from founders, from GPs, from LPs, calling for responsible regulation, that you can have innovative and dynamic markets with appropriate safeguards to counter some of the other voices from Silicon Valley who aren't carrying that narrative, and agree to the importance of overall narrative and storytelling that you cited earlier. And that third, this idea of how do we make responsible technology a core responsible investing issue, learning from what the climate finance movement has done really successfully over the past 10, 15 years, where climate considerations are now integrated into everything from sourcing to due diligence to how LPs engage their portfolio companies in both public and private markets. And there's an entire infrastructure for investors in place to integrate climate considerations into how they do business. We need the same thing for tech, but we need to do it much, much faster given the pace of technology movement. And I think that there's lots we can learn from, and are already working with a number of asset owners, asset managers, investor networks, and responsible AI organizations on how do we build that infrastructure. So
we are at time, but we can hopefully walk slowly out so that you can ask questions of our incredible panelists. So please join me in thanking our panelists, and thank you for coming and joining us today. We are so grateful. Have a wonderful evening.